gorgeous individuals, it's Kav here, and today I'm going to be sharing with you all another original tag. So about a month or so, I was scrolling through YouTube as I do in my day, and I came across a my first time tag, which I know has been a thing on YouTube for a while, but I've never actually watched one. But I did watch that one, and it kind of inspired me to create a my first time tag of my own, except a booktube edition. This is a very laid back tag. It has like 5 questions only, and essentially the goal of it is just to tell your viewers about kind of your first time experiences with reading. It can be as in-depth or as basic as you want, and these were just the questions I managed to come up with. But if any of you choose to recreate this tag and can think of something more, please add more questions, because this is all I could manage to come up with. But without further ado, let's get started. My first time reading a book. So this question is not meant to be like your first time reading The Hungry Little Caterpillar or something. I mean, if you have a vivid memory of that, please feel free to share. But what I was going for with this one was to ask your first time reading a book that you can really recall, because I have a very distinct memory in mind about that, which is why I came up with the question. So the first book I really remember reading that kind of got me into reading to an extent was Esperanza Rising, which I read when I was about 7 or 8, and I just remember absolutely loving that book. I still have a copy of it, and it is old and it has been used many times, and even though it is a book meant for younger kids, I think it's one that I would still go back and read, just because I think it's genuinely an important novel. I haven't read this book in years, but I can still remember so much of the novel. Well, first of all, it features essentially an all Latinx cast, which I think is amazing. And another thing it tackles is kind of classism, because the main character is essentially really rich but is forced into circumstances where she's poor and she has to learn how to deal with that. And of course, I can't speak for that type of representation myself, and I was really young when I read it, so I don't know anything about the representation in it. But I just remember that being such an important read for me growing up, and I just loved it so much. Again, I haven't read this book in years. I probably haven't read it in like 7 years or something, but I still remember all of these different aspects of it. So I think that points out how much of an impact it has left on me. My first time enjoying a book that I read for school. Now for this one, I could go with Esperanza Rising again, because I think that I technically did read that as a summer school book in elementary school, but I'm not going to. I'm going to go with a different answer for this one, and that is The Giver by Lois Lowry. I read this book when I was in 6th grade, and I have reread it many times since. I have seen the movie. I have actually read all of the companion novels. When I read The Giver, I essentially fell in love with it. At my middle school, we read The Giver in 6th grade, then we read the second companion novel, Gathering Blue, in 7th grade, and then we read the third companion novel, Messenger, in 8th grade, and then there's a 4th companion novel, Sun, which wasn't out when they started this process, so it wasn't included on the list. However, I could not wait for that, so my parents actually got me a box set of the first 3 books of The Giver for the holidays that year, and that's the first time I think I ever got books as a present, which was such a big thing for me, because books, like all of you know, are essentially the biggest part of my life now. So The Giver has definitely had such a big impact on me. You know, I don't even really know what exactly it is that I loved about it. Part of it might have even been how we learned it in class, because my English teacher in middle school was so good. He was easily one of the best teachers I've ever had. I think I really do owe him a lot for why I love reading and why I love English as much as I do. He's probably the teacher that's made the biggest impact on me so far in my life, and I think part of that is with The Giver, because we had such good in-depth class discussions, and that was one of the few classes I would participate in because I was so into that book. When I read it, like, dystopias were a huge thing, but I loved The Giver because it was like a dystopian utopia, and that I think was what I loved about it, because in my eyes it was so much more unique than the dystopias we read about at that time. And of course I wasn't as experienced in reading at that point, so I haven't recently reread it, so I don't know if my opinion of it would be changed now, but it is a book that has had such an impact on me and is still one that is probably on my all-time favorites to this day, and I don't think I could ever take it off of that just because of the nostalgic value it has to me. I think it will always have such a place in my heart. My first time reading my favorite book series. In a shocking turn of events to literally no one, I am going to tell you all that the Shadowhunter Chronicles is my favorite series. I know you all are shocked and you can't comprehend that since I've never mentioned it on my channel before, but it's true. No, but real talk, a lot of the reason I did want to make this tag was because I did want to share more of my experience originally reading the Shadowhunter Chronicles, since I talk a lot about it being my favorite series, but I don't think I've ever really talked about my first time reading it. Trigger warning for mental illness and bullying in this next part of the video. But as a lot of you know, I have been diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and I was bullied throughout middle school. I will have my mental illness story linked somewhere if you would like to hear a whole story. I'm not getting into it right now. And I read the Shadowhunter Chronicles while I was at one of the worst points in my life. It was back when I was 12 and I was just suffering. Like, I was flat out suffering, and these books saved me. I still remember why I picked up City of Bones. I read it back in 2013 when the movie came out, and I had seen the trailer for the movie so many times before. Literally, like, every YouTube video I watched, I would see a trailer for that movie. And one time I was watching the trailer and something about the title City of Bones seemed familiar to me. So while I was walking around my house, as I do, I saw a book on my mom's headstand that was called City of Bones, and I was like, wait, is that the same thing as that movie? And then there was a sticker on the cover that was like, soon to be a major motion picture, and I put the pieces together and I realized that it was the same book from that movie trailer. So I was like, well, you know, the movie looked interesting, so I might as well read the book. And I read it and my world was changed forever. I have so many memories of when I read that series for the first time. But I guess if I really want to get into my favorite series, I need to shift gears and talk about the Infernal Devices, because that is my favorite series, like even more than the Mortal Instruments and possibly even more than the Dark Artifices. We'll have to see what happens when Queen of Air and Darkness comes out. I actually don't have as distinct memories reading the Infernal Devices as I do the Mortal Instruments, but I think a lot of that is because my process of reading the Mortal Instruments was so much longer, since I had to wait for City of Heavenly Fire to come out, and I read it the day it came out, and I read those books a little bit slower than I read the Infernal Devices. I have more distinct memories of them. The Infernal Devices, on the other hand, I read each book in one night. I literally read each book in a series of hours overnight at like 3 a.m. in the morning, and one of my most distinct memories of reading it was sobbing through the end of Clockwork Princess and trying to be quiet because it was 3 a.m. and my parents were asleep in the next room, but I was literally sitting there sobbing reading this book because Cassandra Clare was destroying my heart. It's just such a distinct memory that I have, and something that I do wish I could do is just go back and like remember exactly how it felt to read it the first time, because my opinions have obviously evolved and changed over time, but I would love to just go back and relive how I felt that first time reading it. My first time reading my favorite author. Now you'll be wondering, why did I also include this if Cassandra Clare is also my favorite author? Well, first of all, for some people their favorite book and their favorite author are not the same. Second of all, I think I can make distinctions between the difference of reading my favorite book versus my favorite author, because book and author like don't equal each other, if that makes sense. I don't really know if I'm explaining this correctly. Like, while talking about my first time reading the Shadowhunter Chronicles, I kind of talked more about how I felt and the nostalgia of it, but like my first time reading Cassandra Clare, I just remember falling in love with her writing. I know that City of Bones came out almost 11 years ago now, and I know that a lot of people don't like the writing of it, and I understand that, and I can see how much Cassie has grown over time, especially with Lord of Shadows, which is literally a masterpiece, but I fell in love with the writing of City of Bones. I was 12, I knew barely anything about reading. Of course, that doesn't mean that Cassie's writing back then was bad. I'm just saying it was not up to par with what Lord of Shadows is now. But I do have to make a disclaimer that I was 12 at that time and I really didn't know much about writing or reading or anything like that, because this is the series that got me into books the way I am now. But what I do remember is just reading that and feeling all these different emotions, because Cassie just has this way of putting everything you could want into a book. Of course, it depends on what you do want, but all of her books have a combination of action, adventure, humor, romance, suspense, just all these different qualities, and she constructs them and writes them so well and just depicts all of this so well. And I even just recently reread City of Bones. Like, even rereading it, I still loved the writing. That was one of the biggest things I loved about it, just because she has such a personality to her writing. Like, when you read Cassandra Clare's writing, you know it's Cassandra Clare's writing. There's this personality to it that she brings that I don't always find in other authors, and it's something I love about it. I just love that about her. I love the uniqueness of her work. It's something that's even beyond words. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. My first time seeing myself represented. In another shocking turn of events, for this answer, I am going to go with When Dimple Met Rishi by Sandhya Menon. I know you all are shocked and absolutely cannot even believe that this is the book I chose for this one, but it's what I'm going with. I have done so many posts about what reading When Dimple Met Rishi meant to me. I have done Instagram posts about it. I've done a blog post about it. I talked about it in my review. I've talked about it in my favorite books of 2017 video. I've talked about it literally everywhere, but I'll never stop talking about it because the importance of representation is so important, and I think that you don't understand that until you either experience it yourself or you see what it was like for someone else to experience it. And I think we all need to understand why representation is so crucial and needs to be something we continue to push, which is why it's a question I included in this tag. There are many different aspects to me, and of course my skin color is not the only aspect to me, but it's a big part of me. Being Indian is a huge part of my identity, and that was something that I rejected for a long time because society told me to, and When Dimple Met Rishi told me that I didn't have to. The way Indian culture was entwined in that novel, like, it wasn't just reading the two Indian American main characters. That was huge, but it was also how Indian culture was entwined in that book. It was how Sandhya managed to criticize flaws in it but still celebrate the culture. It was how she had Hindi words interspersed throughout the novel. It was how she had Dimple wear kurtas. It was how she had all these little things put in the novel that if you were Indian, you could resonate with. And India is a multicultural country of its own. I am not North Indian, and Dimple and Rishi are, so of course I couldn't relate to every aspect of it, but reading it was still monumental in so many ways, and nothing can ever take that from me. And I'm beyond excited for when From Twinkle with Love enters the world later this year. Okay, those were all the questions I had for this video. I think this video is definitely one that will get people feeling nostalgic, because I got way more nostalgic than I expected answering those questions, but it was also such a nice experience just to throw back to things I had experienced when I was younger. This tag was a lot of fun to do, and it was a lot of fun to create. I hope it was equally as fun to watch. But before I get to my outro, I do have to tag some people, of course. I am going to tag Christina from Proud Book Lion, Gabby from Gabriella Pop, Maddie from Maddie Lee Reads, Joss from Squibbles Reads, and Jenna from Jenna Claire K. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe, because that stuff makes me happy. And go ahead and comment down below your answers to any or all of these questions, and please feel free to do this tag on your blog or your booktube if you so desire. As usual, all of our social media and my Goodreads will be in the description below if you'd like to follow me anywhere else. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you are having a lovely day wherever you are. Please remember, you're beautiful and you deserve the world, and I will see you soon for a brand new video. Goodbye!